The distress signal was weak, almost lost in the static of the Veyron Nebula. Jake Holloway sat up in his pilot chair and rubbed his tired eyes. He had been hauling cargo for 18 hours straight, and his body was begging for sleep. But the signal kept beeping, steady and desperate, like a heartbeat fading in the dark. Unknown origin, his ship's computer said in its flat, mechanical voice. Signal source is approximately 40 minutes from current position. Recommendation: ignore and continue scheduled route. Jake stared at the blinking dot on his screen. The nebula was a dangerous place. Pirates, raiders, and worse things hid in its purple clouds. Smart pilots stayed on the main routes and minded their own business. Smart pilots made it home alive, but Jake had never been very smart. He changed course and pushed his old cargo ship toward the signal. The vessel groaned in protest. It was called the Drifter, a name Jake had given it years ago when he bought it with his life savings. It was slow, ugly, and held together with patches and prayers, but it was his, and it had never let him down. 40 minutes later, he found the source of the signal. An escape pod, small and silver, spinning slowly through the emptiness. Burn marks covered its surface. Someone had been shooting at it. Jake brought the Drifter alongside and extended the docking arm. The connection was rough, but it held. He grabbed his old plasma pistol from under the console and walked to the airlock. He didn't know what he would find inside. Could be survivors, could be a trap, could be bodies. The airlock hissed open, and Jake stepped into the pod. She was huddled in the corner, small and trembling. At first, Jake thought she was a human child, maybe 10 or 11 years old, but then he saw the pale blue tint of her skin, the silver patterns that swirled across her arms like living tattoos, and the large violet eyes that stared at him with pure terror. She was Velothi. Jake's heart dropped into his stomach. The Velothi were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They ruled a vast dominion of stars and looked down on younger races the way a king might look at insects. Humans, in particular, were considered primitive and dangerous. The Velothi had forbidden any human from entering their space. The punishment was death. No trial, no questions. And now Jake had one of their children on his ship. The girl pressed herself harder into the corner. Her clothes were torn and stained with dark blood, and Jake could see wounds on her arms and legs. She was breathing too fast, her chest rising and falling in short, panicked gasps. "Hey," Jake said softly. He holstered his pistol and held up his empty hands. "I'm not going to hurt you, I promise." She hissed something at him in a language he didn't understand. Her voice was weak but filled with fear and anger. "I don't speak Velothi," Jake said. He kept his voice calm and low, the way he used to talk to scared animals back on the farm where he grew up. "But I have a translator somewhere. Just give me a second." He pulled a small device from his pocket and tapped it a few times. The translator was old and cheap, but it worked well enough for basic conversation. "Can you understand me now?" he asked. The girl's eyes widened slightly. "Stay away from me, human," she said. The translator made her voice sound strange and mechanical, but the meaning was clear. "I know what your kind does. You are violent. You are savage. If you touch me, my people will destroy your entire species." Jake sighed and sat down on the floor, keeping a safe distance between them. "I'm not here to hurt you, kid. I picked up your distress signal. Your pod was shot up pretty bad. What happened?" She didn't answer at first. She just watched him with those big violet eyes, searching for any sign of threat. Jake waited. He had learned a long time ago that patience was worth more than force. Finally, she spoke. "Raiders. The Skarn. They attacked our transport. Everyone else is dead." Jake felt a cold anger rise in his chest. The Skarn were slavers, the worst kind of scum in the galaxy. They captured people from weaker ships and sold them to the highest bidder. If they had found this girl's escape pod, they would have taken her too. "Are you hurt bad?" Jake asked. "I will survive," she said. But her voice trembled. Jake nodded and slowly stood up. "I've got medical supplies on my ship. Food and water too. You're welcome to use whatever you need. But first, I need to know where you're trying to go." The girl hesitated. Then she lifted her chin with a pride that seemed too old for her young face. "Valathi space. The homeworld, Velthara." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. Of course. She wanted to go to the one place in the galaxy where he would be killed on sight. The one place where no human had ever set foot. And lived to tell about it. "That's a long way from here," he said. "Then take me as far as you can, and I will find my own way," she said. "I expect nothing from a human." Jake looked at her, this small, wounded, terrified girl who was trying so hard to be brave. He thought about his sister, Amy, who had been about the same age when she got sick. He thought about how helpless he had felt, watching her fade away while he could do nothing to save her. He couldn't save Amy. But maybe he could save someone else. "I'll take you home," Jake said. The girl stared at him. "Why? What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Jake said. "I just don't leave kids stranded in space. It's not who I am." She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But she was too tired and too hurt to argue. She let him help her onto the drifter, and she didn't fight when he cleaned her wounds and wrapped them in bandages. She ate the food he offered, though she didn't thank him for it. That night, as the drifter flew through the darkness toward Valathi space, Jake sat alone in the cockpit and stared at the stars. He was heading into danger, maybe into death, all for a girl who didn't trust him and a species that hated everything he was. But somewhere out there, a mother was waiting for her daughter to come home, and Jake Holloway was going to make sure she did. 3 days passed on the drifter, and the girl barely spoke a word. She stayed in the small passenger cabin Jake had cleared out for her, curled up on the narrow bed with her back to the door. Every time Jake brought her food, she watched him like a trapped animal watching a predator. She ate only after he left the room. Jake didn't push her. He just kept the ship running, checked her bandages when she allowed it, and gave her space. He understood fear. He understood what it meant to feel alone in a universe that didn't care about you. On the 4th day, she came to the cockpit. Jake was sitting in the pilot chair, eating a protein bar and watching the star map on the screen. He heard her footsteps behind him but didn't turn around. He didn't want to scare her away. "Human," she said. "My name is Jake," he replied calmly. "You can use it if you want." There was a long pause. Then she moved closer and sat in the co-pilot seat, keeping as much distance between them as the small cockpit allowed. "Jake," she repeated, as if testing the word. "That is a strange name." "It's pretty normal where I come from," Jake said with a small smile. "Do you have a name you'd like me to use?" Another pause. "Kiraveth." "Kiraveth," Jake said, nodding. "That's a nice name. Sounds important." Her violet eyes flickered with something he couldn't read. "It is. My name carries weight among my people." Jake didn't ask what she meant. He had a feeling she would tell him when she was ready. Instead, he pointed at the star map. "We're about 6 days from the Valathi border. I'll need to stop for fuel in 2 days. There's a station on the edge of neutral space. Should be safe enough." Kiraveth studied the map. "You have planned this carefully." "I try to think ahead," Jake said. "Keeps me alive." She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question he had been waiting for. "Why are you helping me? You know what my people think of humans. You know what will happen to you if we are caught." Jake leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. The metal was stained and patched in a dozen places. This ship had been through a lot. Just like him. "I had a sister once," he said slowly. "Her name was Amy. She was 8 years younger than me. Smart kid. Always asking questions. Always wanting to learn how things worked." He stopped and took a breath. It still hurt to talk about her, even after all these years. "When I was 15, there was a sickness that spread through our colony. Medical supplies couldn't get there in time. A lot of people died." He paused. "Amy was one of them. I sat with her until the end, holding her hand. I couldn't do anything to save her. I was just a kid myself." Kiraveth didn't say anything, but she was listening. Really listening. "After that, I promised myself something, Jake continued. I promised that if I ever had a chance to help someone, I would take it. I couldn't save my sister, but maybe I could save someone else's. Maybe I could make sure another family didn't have to go through what I went through. He turned to look at her. You're someone's daughter, Kiraveth. Someone out there is scared and worried, and praying that you're okay. That's reason enough for me. Kiraveth's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away before they could fall. Her people probably didn't cry in front of others. Jake pretended not to notice. I am the daughter of Queen Silvetha, she said quietly. Ruler of the Valathi Dominion. Jake felt his heart skip a beat, but he kept his face calm. That's a big title. She is the most powerful being in our region of space, Kiraveth said. She has ruled for 300 years. She is wise and strong, and feared by all who oppose her. Sounds intense, Jake said. She will not understand why you helped me, Kiraveth said, her voice dropping. She believes humans are dangerous and untrustworthy. She will think you kidnapped me, or that you want something in return. Jake shrugged. Then I'll just have to explain it to her. Kiraveth stared at him. You would walk into the heart of my mother's power, knowing she might kill you, just to return me safely? That's the plan, Jake said. You are either very brave or very foolish. Jake grinned. Probably both. For the first time since he found her, Kiraveth almost smiled. The fuel station was small and dirty. The kind of place that asked no questions and expected no answers. Jake docked the drifter and told Kiraveth to stay hidden in her cabin. She didn't argue. He was walking back to the ship with supplies when he saw them. 3 Skarn, tall and reptilian, with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like black glass. They were standing near the drifter, scanning the hull with handheld devices. Jake's blood turned cold. They were looking for her. He moved quickly, trying to reach the ship before they noticed him. But one of the Skarn turned and saw him. Its lipless mouth curled into something like a smile. Human, it hissed. You have something we want. Jake dropped the supplies and pulled his plasma cutter from his belt. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all he had. His pistol was still on the ship. I don't know what you're talking about, Jake said. The Skarn laughed, a horrible wet sound. The Valathi child. We tracked her pod to this sector. Our scans show Valathi life signs on your ship. Give her to us, and we will let you live. Not happening, Jake said. The Skarn stopped laughing. Then you die. They moved fast, faster than Jake expected. The first one swung a blade at his head. Jake ducked and drove the plasma cutter into its shoulder. The creature screamed and staggered back. The second Skarn tackled him to the ground, and Jake felt claws tear into his side. Pain exploded through his body. He rolled, kicked, and fought with everything he had. He was bleeding badly now. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. If he went down, they would take Kiraveth. They would sell her to the highest bidder. And no one would ever see her again. Jake grabbed a piece of broken metal from the ground and drove it into the second Skarn's eye. It fell, thrashing and screaming. The third one hesitated, looking at its fallen companions. Run, Jake growled, blood dripping from his lips. Tell your friends what happens when you mess with my passengers. The Skarn turned and fled into the station's shadows. Jake stumbled back to the drifter, leaving a trail of blood behind him. He barely made it through the airlock before his legs gave out. He collapsed against the wall, pressing his hand against the wound in his side. Kiraveth appeared in the doorway. Her violet eyes went wide when she saw him. You're hurt, she said, her voice shaking. I'll be fine, Jake said, though he wasn't sure that was true. We need to get out of here. More of them might come. She didn't argue. She helped him to the cockpit, and Jake punched in the coordinates with bloody fingers. The drifter lifted off and jumped to faster than light speed, leaving the station behind. As the stars blurred around them, Kiraveth knelt beside Jake and pressed bandages to his wounds. Her hands were trembling, but her touch was gentle. You almost died for me, she whispered. Why? Jake looked up at her and managed a weak smile. I told you, kid. It's not who I am to leave someone behind. Kiraveth didn't say anything. But for the first time, she believed him. The edge of Velothi space was marked by a wall of ships. Jake had never seen anything like it. Hundreds of vessels hung in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver and gold in the light of distant stars. Each one was beautiful in a cold, deadly way, like a blade made for ceremony but sharp enough to kill. The drifter looked like a piece of garbage next to them. Jake almost laughed at how absurd this was. A beaten-up cargo hauler, held together with patches and hope, floating before the most powerful fleet in the known galaxy. They've seen us, Kiraveth said quietly. She was standing beside him in the cockpit, watching the ships through the viewport. Her wounds had healed well over the past few days, and she no longer looked at Jake with fear. But now there was something else in her eyes. Worry. Yeah, I figured, Jake said. The warning lights on his console were going crazy. He was being scanned, targeted, and probably marked for destruction. A voice crackled through the communication system. It spoke in Velothi first, then switched to basic galactic common. Unidentified vessel. You have entered restricted Velothi territory. Human life signs detected. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction. Jake looked at Kiraveth. You ready for this? She nodded, her jaw set with determination. Let me speak to them. Jake opened the communication channel and stepped back. Kiraveth moved forward and spoke in her native tongue. Her voice was stronger than he had ever heard it, carrying the weight of authority that seemed too heavy for someone so young. There was a long silence. Then the voice on the other end changed. It became faster, more urgent. Other voices joined in, speaking over each other in rapid Velothi that Jake couldn't follow. What's happening? He asked. Kiraveth turned to him with a strange expression. They know who I am now. They thought I was dead. The whole Dominion has been searching for me. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. So, they're not going to blow us up? No, she said. But they're sending ships to escort us. And Jake. She hesitated. They're going to take you into custody. They don't understand why you're with me. They think you might have taken me against my will. I figured that might happen, Jake said calmly. I told them you rescued me. I told them you saved my life. But they're not listening. Her voice cracked with frustration. They see only that you're human. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. It's okay, Kira. You did your best. The rest is up to your mother. 3 Velothi warships moved alongside the drifter and guided it toward the homeworld. Jake watched through the viewport as they traveled through Velothi space. It was beautiful, beyond anything he had imagined. Massive stations floated among colorful nebulas. Ships moved in graceful patterns, like flocks of birds dancing through the sky. Planets glittered in the distance, covered in lights that spoke of billions of lives, and at the center of it all was Velthara, the Velothi homeworld. It was enormous, wrapped in swirling clouds of purple and blue. Cities covered its surface, their towers reaching so high they seemed to touch the stars. It's amazing, Jake said softly. Kiraveth looked at him. You're about to be put in chains, and you're admiring the view? Jake shrugged. Might as well enjoy the little things. She shook her head, but there was a hint of a smile on her lips. The drifter landed in a massive docking bay, and Jake was immediately surrounded by Velothi soldiers. They were tall and elegant, their armor gleaming like mirrors. They pointed weapons at him that he didn't recognize but knew could probably turn him to ash in a heartbeat. Step away from the princess, one of them commanded. She's not my prisoner, Jake said, keeping his voice steady. I found her. I saved her. I brought her home. Silence, human. They put restraints on his wrists and ankles. The metal was cold and heavy. Jake didn't resist. Fighting would only make things worse. Kiraveth tried to stop them. He speaks the truth. He's not your enemy. He risked his life to protect me. But the soldiers didn't listen. They bowed to her with deep respect and apologized for not finding her sooner. They praised their gods for her safe return. And then they dragged Jake away like a criminal. He was taken to a holding cell deep within a building that seemed to be made of crystal and light. The walls glowed softly, and the air smelled like flowers he didn't recognize. Even the prison was beautiful here. Jake sat on the floor and leaned against the wall. His wounds still ached, though they were healing. He closed his eyes and thought about the path that had led him here. A distress signal in the nebula. A frightened girl in a broken pod. A choice to help when walking away would have been so much easier. He didn't regret it. No matter what happened next, he didn't regret it. Hours passed. Maybe days. Jake couldn't tell. The cell had no windows, and no one came to speak with him. Then, finally, the door opened. Kira Veth stood in the doorway. She was dressed differently now, in flowing robes of silver and violet that marked her as royalty. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style, and jewels sparkled on her skin. She looked like a princess from a storybook, but her eyes were the same, violet and fierce and full of fire. "I spoke to my mother," she said. "She's agreed to hear your case personally." Jake raised an eyebrow. "That's good, right?" Kira Veth bit her lip. "My mother is not known for mercy, Jake. She has ruled for 3 centuries, and she has done so by being strong and unyielding. She has never trusted other species, especially humans. She believes your people are violent by nature." "Can't argue that we've got a messy history," Jake admitted. "This is serious," Kira Veth said, stepping closer. "She could execute you. She could imprison you forever. She could do things I don't even want to think about." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Then I guess I'll have to convince her otherwise." Kira Veth stared at him. "How can you be so calm?" "Because I did the right thing," Jake said. "Whatever happens to me, I brought you home. Your mother has her daughter back. That's worth something, isn't it?" Kira Veth's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly and looked away. "I'm going to speak for you," she said. "I'm going to tell her everything. The way you saved me, the way you fought the Skarn, the way you treated me with kindness when you had no reason to." "I appreciate that," Jake said. "Don't thank me yet." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Jake? Yeah? I'm glad you found me in that pod." Before he could respond, she was gone, and the door closed behind her. Jake leaned back against the wall and smiled. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it. The throne room of Velthara was the largest space Jake had ever seen. It stretched so far that the walls disappeared into shadow, and the ceiling rose so high it might as well have been the sky itself. Pillars of crystal lined the path to the throne, each one humming with a soft inner light. Thousands of Velathi filled the hall, standing in perfect rows, their eyes fixed on the human being marched through their midst. Jake walked with his head held high. The restraints on his wrists were heavy, and guards flanked him on both sides, their weapons ready. He could feel the hatred in the room, the disgust, the disbelief that a creature like him had dared to set foot in their sacred space. But he didn't look down. He didn't show fear. He had done nothing wrong, and he would face whatever came with his dignity intact. At the far end of the hall, the throne rose like a mountain of silver and starlight, and on it sat Queen Sylvetha. Jake had imagined what she might look like. He had pictured something cold and distant, like a statue made of ice. But the reality was far more overwhelming. She was tall, even seated, with skin the color of moonlight and eyes that burned like twin violet suns. Her hair flowed around her like a living thing, silver strands that seemed to move on their own. She wore no crown, but she didn't need one. Everything about her screamed power in a way that made Jake's knees want to buckle. She was ancient. She was terrifying. And she was looking at him like he was an insect that had crawled into her palace. The guards forced Jake to his knees before the throne. He landed hard on the crystal floor, but he didn't make a sound. "Human," the queen said. Her voice was soft but carried through the entire hall, as if the walls themselves were helping her speak. "You stand accused of entering forbidden Velathi space. You have been found in the company of my daughter, the Princess Kira Veth. Explain yourself." You informe. Jake took a breath. Your Majesty, I found your daughter in an escape pod near the Veyran Nebula. Her transport had been attacked by Skarn raiders. She was injured and alone. I gave her medical care, food, and shelter. Then I brought her home. A murmur ran through the crowd. The Queen's expression didn't change. And what do you want in return? She asked. Riches? Political favor? An alliance with my enemies, perhaps? Nothing, Jake said. I want nothing. The Queen's eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe that a human, a member of the most violent and primitive species in the galaxy, risked death to help a Velothi child out of pure kindness? I don't expect you to believe anything, Your Majesty. I'm just telling you what happened. The court stirred with anger. Jake could hear weapons being gripped, armor shifting. They wanted him dead. They wanted him to pay for the insult of standing before their queen and speaking like he was her equal. But the queen raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. You are either very brave, she said slowly, or very foolish. Jake almost smiled. Kira Veth had said the same thing. The doors at the far end of the hall burst open, and a figure came running through. The guards moved to stop her, but she pushed past them with a strength that didn't match her small frame. Kira Veth raced down the length of the throne room and threw herself between Jake and the guards. Her elaborate robes were disheveled, and her hair had come loose from its careful arrangement. She was breathing hard, her violet eyes blazing with determination. Mother, she cried. He rescued me. He saved my life. The Queen's composure cracked, just for a moment. Something flickered in her ancient eyes. Something that might have been surprise, or something deeper. Kira Veth, she said. You forget yourself. This is a formal proceeding. I don't care about proceedings, Kira Veth shouted. The crowd gasped at her defiance. I care about the truth. This human found me when I was dying. The Skarn had killed everyone in my escort. I was alone and wounded and terrified. And he saved me. She turned to face the court, her voice rising. He shared his food with me when he had little. He gave me medicine when I was in pain. He sat with me through the long nights and made sure I wasn't afraid, and when the Skarn came for me again, he fought them. 3 raiders, armed and dangerous. He fought them with nothing but a tool from his cargo hold. And he nearly died protecting me. She pulled at Jake's shirt, revealing the scars on his side, still fresh and red. These wounds are from that fight. He bled for me. He almost gave his life for a girl he had no reason to care about. The court was silent now. Even the guards seemed uncertain. Kira Veth turned back to her mother, and her voice dropped to something quieter, more personal. Mother, I know what you think of humans. I thought the same things. I was taught that they were savages, that they could never be trusted, that they would hurt me if given the chance. But Jake never hurt me. He treated me with kindness I didn't deserve because I was cruel to him at first. I said terrible things. I called him names. And still, he helped me. She walked up the steps toward the throne, something that was clearly forbidden based on the shocked reactions of the court. But the Queen didn't stop her. You taught me that actions matter more than words, Kira Veth said softly, standing before her mother. You taught me that we judge others by what they do, not what they say. So judge him by his actions, mother. He did not kidnap me. He did not demand ransom. He walked into the heart of our territory, knowing he would probably die, just to bring me back to you. Queen Sylvetha looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she looked at Jake, still kneeling on the floor, still meeting her gaze without fear. Human, she said. Jake Holloway, why did you do this? Tell me the truth, and I will know if you lie. Jake thought about his answer. He could try to say something clever, something political, something that might save his life. But that wasn't who he was. I did it because she was a kid in trouble, he said simply. Where I come from, you don't leave someone behind just because helping them is hard or dangerous. You don't walk away from someone who needs you just because they're different from you. He paused, then continued. I didn't do it because she was a princess. I didn't know that when I found her. I did it because she was someone's daughter. I did it because I've lost people I loved, and I know what it feels like to be helpless. I did it because if there's a chance to save someone, you take it. That's what it means to be human. The hall was completely silent. Queen Silvatha rose from her throne and descended the steps, her robes flowing behind her like water. She walked past her daughter, past the guards, and stopped directly in front of Jake. She was so close he could feel the energy radiating from her, ancient and powerful beyond anything he could comprehend. She could destroy him with a thought. She could erase him from existence with a wave of her hand. Instead, she studied him with those burning violet eyes, seeing something in him that he couldn't see himself. In 3 centuries, she said quietly, no one from a lesser species has ever spoken to me with such honesty. No one has ever stood before me without fear, without agenda, without the desire for something in return. She reached down and touched his face, her fingers cool against his skin. Perhaps, she said, we have been wrong about your kind. And for the first time, Jake Holloway allowed himself to hope. The Queen ordered Jake's restraints removed immediately. The guards hesitated, their training warring with their instincts. But they obeyed. The heavy metal fell from Jake's wrists and clattered on the crystal floor. He rubbed the raw skin where the restraints had been and slowly rose to his feet. Queen Silvatha turned to face her court. Thousands of Valathi stared back at her, waiting for her judgment. Many of them still looked at Jake with suspicion and hatred, but they remained silent. Their queen was speaking. For generations, Silvatha said, her voice carrying through the vast hall, we have taught our children that humans are dangerous. We have told them stories of human wars, human violence, human cruelty. We have kept them away from our borders and forbidden any contact. We believed we were protecting ourselves from a species that knew only destruction. She paused, letting her words settle. But today, a human stands before us. He entered our space knowing the punishment was death. He faced our weapons and our judgment without flinching. And he asks for nothing in return for saving my daughter's life. Not riches, not power, not protection, nothing. The court murmured, a wave of sound passing through the crowd like wind through grass. I have ruled this dominion for 3 centuries, the Queen continued. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed the birth and death of stars, and in all that time, I have never encountered a being quite like this one. She turned to look at Jake, and something in her ancient eyes had changed. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it was no longer coldness either. It was something like curiosity, something like respect. Jake Holloway, she said formally, I hereby declare you a friend of the throne. You are granted full immunity in all Valathi territories. You are recognized as a protector of the royal bloodline. Any who harm you will face the full wrath of the Dominion. The court erupted into noise. Some gasped in shock. Others shouted in protest. A human? Given such an honor? It was unthinkable. It was scandalous. It was unprecedented. But the Queen raised her hand, and silence returned. Furthermore, she said, and now, her voice had an edge of steel, I am ordering a formal review of our policies toward humanity. We will send observers to human space. We will study their culture, their history, their values, and we will consider opening diplomatic relations with their species. Now the protests truly began. Valathi nobles stepped forward, speaking over each other, demanding to be heard. How could the Queen do this? How could she abandon centuries of tradition based on the actions of one human? Silvatha let them speak for a moment. Then she silenced them with a single sentence. If one human can show such courage and compassion, she said, then perhaps we have been wrong to judge all of them by the actions of their worst. Perhaps it is time to see what they might become, rather than what they have been. She looked at Jake once more. You have given me much to think about, human. My daughter will see to your care while your ship is repaired. You will be treated as an honored guest. Jake bowed his head slightly. Thank you, Your Majesty. Do not thank me, she said, and there was something almost like amusement in her voice. You have turned my entire court upside down and challenged beliefs that have stood for 1,000 years. You have caused me a great deal of trouble. Sorry about that, Jake said. No, you're not. No, he admitted. I'm not. The Queen almost smiled. Almost. The next few days passed in a blur. Jake was taken to luxurious quarters that were bigger than his entire ship. He was given new clothes, real food, and the best medical care in the galaxy. Velothi doctors examined his wounds and healed them with technology he couldn't begin to understand. When they were done, even his oldest scars had faded. Kiraveth visited him every day. She showed him the gardens of the palace, vast forests of alien flowers that glowed in colors he had no names for. She took him to the observatory, where they watched ships moving through the stars like fireflies. She introduced him to her tutors, her guards, her pet creatures that looked like a cross between a cat and a cloud. You've changed things here, she told him one evening. As they sat on a balcony overlooking the city, the lights of Velthara sparkled below them, a sea of brilliance stretching to the horizon. People are talking. Some are angry. But others are listening. They're asking questions they've never asked before. Questions like what? Jake asked. Questions about humans. About why you do the things you do. About whether my mother is right to reconsider our position. Jake was quiet for a moment. I'm not anything special, Kira. I'm just a cargo hauler. I didn't do anything that any decent person wouldn't have done. Kiraveth shook her head. That's what makes you special, Jake. You don't see it. You think what you did was ordinary. But to us, it's extraordinary. Our people don't risk their lives for strangers. We calculate. We evaluate. We determine if an action is worth the cost. You just acted. You saw someone in need. And you helped them. No calculation. No evaluation. Just kindness. Jake didn't know what to say to that. My mother wants to speak with you again before you leave, Kiraveth said. A private audience. She has more questions. I'll answer them as best I can, Jake said. The next morning, Jake was brought to a small chamber in the palace, far from the grand throne room. Queen Sylvetha was waiting for him alone. Without guards or advisors, she sat in a simple chair, and she looked almost normal like this, almost approachable, almost. Sit, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. Jake sat. Tell me more about your kind, the Queen said. Tell me what I don't know. So Jake talked. He told her about human history, the good and the bad. He told her about their wars, their failures, their cruelty. He didn't hide anything or make excuses, but he also told her about their courage, about the people who ran into danger to save others, about the doctors who fought diseases they couldn't cure, about the ordinary people who gave everything they had to help strangers they would never meet. We're not perfect, he said. We never will be. We fight, we fail, we hurt each other. But we also love fiercely, forgive often, and keep trying even when there's no hope. We give our lives for our children, and sometimes for children who aren't our own. That's what it means to be human. All of it. The good and the bad, mixed together in a way that doesn't always make sense. The Queen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. You have given me much to consider, she finally said. I cannot promise that my people will change overnight. Prejudice is a deep wound, and it heals slowly. But I can promise that we will begin. We will try. That's all anyone can do, Jake said. When the time came for Jake to leave, half the palace seemed to have gathered at the docking bay. Velothi nobles, guards, servants, and officials stood in careful rows, watching the human who had turned their world upside down. The drifter looked completely different. The Velothi engineers had rebuilt it from the ground up. It still had the same shape. But the hull was new. The engines were upgraded, and the interior had been completely modernized. It was still his ship, but it was better than it had ever been. Kiraveth met him at the boarding ramp. She was dressed simply today, without the elaborate robes of royalty. She looked like the girl he had found in the escape pod. Scared but brave, she held out a small pendant, silver and violet, shaped like a star with a crystal at its center. "This is the symbol of my house," she said. "It marks you as a protector of the royal family. Carry it always. And if you ever need anything at all, send word. I will come." Jake took the pendant and hung it around his neck. It was warm against his skin, humming faintly with energy. "Thanks, kid," he said. Then he did something that made the entire court gasp in shock. He ruffled her hair. Kiraveth laughed, a bright sound that echoed through the docking bay. She threw her arms around him in a quick hug, then stepped back, blinking rapidly. "Don't be a stranger, Jake Holloway," she said. "Wouldn't dream of it, Your Highness." He boarded the drifter and took his place in the pilot seat. The controls felt familiar despite the upgrades. Some things didn't change. As the ship lifted off and climbed toward the stars, Jake looked back at the beautiful world below. Thousands of Valathi watched him go. They didn't wave or cheer, but they watched, and as he jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Valathi space behind, Jake smiled. Sometimes one person could make a difference. Sometimes kindness was enough, and sometimes the universe surprised you.